So I've said it's been quite a day, and I wanted to give us a very short summary of what's happened today, just so that we set the scene for these remarks that are coming. So we've been talking about how technology can be designed in ways that result in the amplification of hate and polarization, which can contribute to conflict escalation. But we've also been talking about how it can be designed to foster bridge building, inclusion, and cohesion. And in our discussions, we've started to talk a lot about policy, which is the focus of this closing reflection. We've talked about how there can be policy incentives to address the challenges on commercial platforms, and how there can also be policy incentives to build or to use alternative pro-social platforms and tools. So my opening question for this panel is really a reflection on all of those conversations we've had today. I want to focus just on one thing, and then from there I am sure there is so much you will both expand on. There was recently, we were having a conversation earlier, Danvas, and you told me about this petition for a ban on TikTok. I would be very interested to know whether you think TikTok should be banned in Kenya, and if not, then how do we address the negative impact of platforms such as TikTok?
Thank you very much. Nice being here. It's a privilege being here among peers in this space, especially in peace building. With experts, I've interacted with a few of them. So I feel privileged to be here. Also, I feel sad because I've missed a lot. I feel like I've missed a lot. I mean, I was in and out of a couple of workshops and so rich in content, and this is kind of my space. So I feel sad. So hopefully, I promise next time I'll attend the entire a conference. And I was telling you, Elena, before I quickly answered that question, I realized sometime this week that today is a Saturday and there's a conference. So in my mind, I thought they were wrong. Something is wrong with either them or my calendar. Because you don't have conferences especially from a government perspective, you don't do conferences on weekends. So I had to call up and make sure am I going the right thing and in the right place at the right time. So, but this is pretty cool. I'm very impressed of what I've seen and what you're doing, especially with the coalition. Every single partner in this coalition, a number of them, we've worked with them, especially last year during the election or previously. So we partnered with them. So thank you so much for the incredible work you're doing, especially in the peace building. To answer your question, actually, just recently, this week, our commission was summoned by one of the committees in Parliament because it's a petition to ban TikTok. And I was the one actually making the presentation. Again, as you heard, my name is Danvas Makori. Within the commission, I chair the technical committee. We have 4 committees. The technical committee actually involves the entire work of the commission. So peace building, public education, research, investigation, and that's some of us are here. And so I was responding to that very question. It's a public petition to ban TikTok because it's used, one, for misinformation, a lot of disinformation, misinformation, a lot of explicit content. So we did a submission, which I should make sure that you can have it here and go through it. We still added more, especially when I was there. And outrightly to say it's no, I don't believe TikTok should be banned in Kenya. I don't think banning any social media platform is the way to go for many reasons. Because if you ban one, then second, another will come. Secondly, if you understand the history of our country and then our new constitution, freedom of speech is guaranteed and anchored. Yeah, there's a limit to it, and it's very explicit to what it is limited to. And I don't believe in punishing a whole lot of people because of a few bad apples. So there's a way to limit and engage that, especially, and I'm glad this is a policy discussion we are having. But I'll slightly veer to the technical side a little bit, just a little bit. In our submissions to Parliament, we made it very clear it's not the way to go. One, because TikTok in this country, Kenya leads, Kenya leads in the, I think it's number 3 in the world in TikTok adoptivity in the whole world. We're a leading country when it comes to, especially when it comes to news. It's a growing space. We have about 23 million users of social media in this country. And if you look at the trends and analysis, because we as an institution do a lot of social media monitoring, all of the platforms, we monitor them. So the history of TikTok and this ban, during last year, during the election, we had engagement with all social media companies. We had a meeting with Meta, with then Twitter, which is now X, with TikTok, with Google. And the problem with government sometimes, there's an adversarial role towards such entities, okay? We're always fighting them, and they are fighting us, and it's always that. So we chose a different pathway of partnership. I believe, and we believe, especially in our organization, the role of partnership. So we had invited them each and had a lengthy discussion. We had an agreement with TikTok. Actually, we posted our agreement and submitted our agreement with TikTok, which you can have it too. So it's a public document, so it's nothing secret. But they had agreement with us on what they should do during last year, what they should comply with or subscribe to. And to an extent, they kind of tried. They were new in the space in terms of content moderation. They're not as experienced as, let's say, Meta. The algorithms were not as robust as Twitter or X, for that matter. And we couldn't understand that, and they were kind of new also in our space. So they had more leeway than other platforms. And they were collaborative to an extent. They were responsive, let me use that word. They were responsive. Every time we had an issue, whether it's a pull down, we had 24-hour monitoring of all social media platforms, including traditional media, 16 radio stations and TV. So we monitor everything that goes on in communication, together with our partners, CAK, and the DCI. So for me, I said we shouldn't ban them because they were responsive and we can engage them on that level. Secondly, there are certain, now to the real meat is regulation now. There's certain things that we can regulate in that space. So we have many regulations and there's gaps in our regulations. If you look at even our act, which is being amended, if you look at CAK, if you look at the Communications Act, there's a couple of gaps that are there. And the problem, as you know very well, because most of you are in this space, legislation catches up with technology all the time. Okay, and tech companies, of course, exploit that to their advantage. You know, they're there to make a buck, and I understand that. But when you engage them in our experience, they respond. We had a meeting in New York with the Office of Genocide Prevention, the Secretary General, the Special Advisor of Genocide Prevention, concerning the platforms I've mentioned, concerning our election last year. And the agreement was if we talk to them now in our level in this country they don't respond to, they can summon the CEOs in New York and do that. So there was already mechanisms we were able to escalate if there wasn't a response. And there was a response apart from Meta. We had an issue with Meta. I think it was very publicly. I don't have time to explain here, but if there's time, I can explain. So we gave a submission, to answer your question quickly, on what mechanisms and what regulations should come in place, what TikTok should do and can do, especially on content moderation, on local content moderators. That was a big deal for us. I believe in win-win situation, whereby they can hire a lot of content moderators who are local. The algorithms they have, you know very well, don't pick up our local dialects, whether it's Kikuyu, whether it's Kalenjin, whether it's Luo, they just don't. So you need actually an actual human being who's doing content moderation, who sits somewhere here, not in Ireland, you know, not in Belfast, to actually capture what people are saying. Because now, unfortunately, we do their job. Yeah, it's me to say, okay, this is wrong, and you need to pull this down. That's their job. It's not really my job as a government to do that, but we kind of have to do it, and sometimes it's resource consuming a lot. It's very intensive in terms of human resource and technology resource for that matter. And then we also said, as a matter of fact, there's a punitive aspect to it, okay? If you look at the EU regulations when it comes to digital space, they're very stringent. And you know very well, colleagues, that social media companies have this three-tier approach to especially countries, you know, how they treat the US and the EU, and so there's a mid-tier country somewhere, and we're the last ones down here. And our issue with Meta, and same thing with TikTok, is the same standards you apply in Europe in terms of your own content moderation and regulation should be just applied here. That's what we are required. You can do it. The point is, you can do it. You're doing it right now. So why don't you do it in Kenya? So I think it's very practical. We're not really demanding much. And I think they can do it. I know there's been a positive response to them, and we're waiting for a letter coming from them in terms of what we did. That overall submission to Parliament that they should not ban TikTok. I don't think they will ban TikTok, but we can still have a discussion with CAK and other government organizations on that matter. I think we can have a collaborative approach and address issues of regulation that I mentioned. Yes.
Thank you. I was so engaged in your response, I didn't have my microphone ready. So what about you, Nadima? What's your view on this proposal to ban TikTok? And if there isn't a ban, then what is it that needs to happen for TikTok to be a conducive environment, particularly for youth?
Hello, everyone. First of all, very happy to hear the commissioner say that. I've been a little bit on edge with this particular matter, and I say this because we are a youth organization. So not only is it content creators who are young, content moderators are young. And so just to put it into perspective, today in the Daily Nation on page 3, there's a story about content moderators and what they go through in a typical day. And this is a big deal because of the case that's currently happening in the country with Meta. And what I do feel the issues are around moderation, around regulation, and the gaps that Commissioner has just talked about. That's where the issue is. But at times when we hear the debates, we're losing a bit of focus. And it's also concerning because when you talk about fairness, because we're basically talking about exploitation. This is modern day exploitation of labor. When you have people who work for these platforms and how they are being treated. We have cases of mental health, PTSD. We had 3 cases of suicide this year alone from the content moderators. And even when you compare the pay, they'll give this feedback that, we compare GDPs. So based on the GDP of that country is going to determine the basic salary pay. But then, when you argue across, a content moderator in Kenya is doing similar work to a content moderator in US. So it's a matter of skill. And so there's also questions around professionalizing this space. There's also questions around what is fair pay, what is equity, because even for a typical example, a worker in the US would have access to psychosocial support, a therapist. Here in Kenya, you're given a coach. And you're basically told, it sucks, the job is tough, deal with it. So you're motivated to keep working. And you're not told that there's something actually wrong with the work that you have. And so a lot of this information is now coming up to the fore. And I think those are the questions that we need to be answering in terms of how do we, create this work, have better moderation, but also people are not losing their minds to do this work. And I've not even mentioned the fact that statistically, the worst content is actually sent to African content moderators. The worst. So you're underpaid, the worst is sent here, and then they are short-staffed. We're talking about thousands of languages. And I met one content moderator who's supposed to moderate the whole of Namibia. Come on, guys. And so even when you talk about this country alone, the average age is 19. So people who have access to smartphones will get access to smartphones and be online. And even when you talk about markets, many big tech companies don't view Africa as a market. They don't. But it has a very large population that they can tap into, but they don't view Africa as a market to tap into specifically for opportunity. It's more to reap. And that's what we are trying to highlight and to escalate, because we're going to have a future of young people being encouraged to enter the digital economy, but we're actually harming them faster by giving them these opportunities without recognizing is what we're worried about.
Thank you, Nadima. And I think this point about, the African market and how much it's valued by tech platforms is very important, because the fact that there is a less of an economic incentive for these platforms to operate does not mean there's any less content to moderate, right? There's no relationship between those two things, or there is a relationship, but it's not the only thing that drives it. And I wanted to actually pivot a little bit, because one of the things that happened this morning in the opening panel is we talked about the fact that content moderation is an aspect of policy that we often focus on, and you've both highlighted the importance of this, whether it's responding to government requests on content moderation and content moderators, or this concern about the labor market in this respect. But there's another thing, which is that there's also a concern with the fact that one of the speakers this morning used something that Maria Ressa sometimes says, which is that content moderation, it's like you've got a polluted river, you take out a glass of water, polluted water, you clean that, but you still got a polluted river, and you haven't dealt with the pollution plant upstream. So here's my provocation to you both, if you'll bear with me. Let's imagine that TikTok disappeared and Meta disappeared, and these platforms that we have right now disappeared, and you had a chance to say what you would want to see in platforms that connect people in some way, right? What would they look like? What would a replacement look like? What would you not have that Meta and TikTok have, and what would you have that they have? Shall we go the other way this time? Do you want to go first? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think that there are people who are building this, or trying to build this. Pearl City is one of them, a platform here, grown and born in Kenya, and looking at the aspect of the social context that we have, and being able to put it on this platform, and having conversations around volunteering to moderate, and it being a community effort, and also a responsibility of a user. And so that it's not just blamed or put on. So far, a lot of blame has gone on the user. And right now, we are focusing on the platform themselves as well, to be held responsible also for the fact that algorithms can be skewed and things like that. So what would a relationship look like? Because even when we look at social media, for instance, it's become part of our daily lives and even our character. So it's not just something that we switch on and switch off. It also frames how we think. It frames what our realities are, how we respond to them. So when we see them being interconnected, that partnership is going to be key, and that's going to be the future that I'm hoping to see. And I think that other foundations, such as Mozilla Foundation, are also doing a lot of research around that, the aspect of volunteerism, because you talk of the river. So you can do so much to make sure that the factory reduces in terms of the pollution coming downstream, but it has to be a community effort to make sure that they're also not throwing trash into the river. So you might have clean water, but if community doesn't effortlessly work with everyone involved, then they will be the ones who end up dirtying the water in the long run. So that's what I would say. A collaborative approach would be something that would be different.
To use your allegory, and this allegory is perfect, the question is that who's the polluter upstream? Yeah, who's the polluter upstream? And Mercy is right in terms of even government approach to whether it's contamination or it's pull downs. And in reality, I can tell you for a fact we had a major issues with some of this. The reason we had a conference with them is because we had an issue with pull downs. Because you know very well how quickly things go viral. In 10 seconds, it's gone viral. So by the time I send a request to Meta to pull down, in the old days, you needed to have a court order, have to go to the... Gosh, it was a lengthy process. It takes 3 days for me to see a judge and request, and then talk to my colleagues at CAK, and we have to agree, and then meanwhile, it's just getting viral every single second. So we had agreed, guys, we can't do this anymore. And she's right, because for every one or two that you're pulling down, there's still thousands and thousands that are out there. Now, the question is, who's the polluter? And in this regard, let me flip it this way. Can good people, so this is politics and peace now, and content, can good people elect bad leaders? Yeah. And can bad people elect good leaders? You see, because this is a conversation we are having here. This is a conversation we're having. You see, the truth of the matter, and as much as from a government perspective, I am trying to hold, quote unquote, the tech companies accountable. But if you look at our laws in this country, the Communications Act to begin with, there's a different standard that is held to, let's say, KTN, NTV, Citizen, than there is to Meta, Twitter. Because in our Act, Communication Act, I think it was amended, I think 2019, Facebook, Twitter, they're not content originators. Okay? They don't originate any content. They're just there. You can say anything you want to say. Okay? Facebook does not originate anything. They just provide you to say anything you want to say. So we had an issue with them, the legal issue with them. And by the way, as a matter of record, we have enjoined in a suit that you've had, and you mentioned, we have two suits with Meta. Still coming from last year, one of the issues with Ethiopia, because we know how powerful and how dangerous content can be. In our space, to us, it's not theory, it's reality. I can show you even posts that were happening yesterday, coming from West Pokot and Turkana. And I can tell you, I've seen people die because of posts. Okay? This is what I do every single day. So this is not theory for me. And listen to me carefully. You see, it is us as the people that determine what, generally speaking, is in these platforms. Okay, so there's has to be a level of introspection to ourselves, because we're always blaming them. I'm always on calls with better and all. But the question is, it is the people of West Pokot, it's the people of Turkana, it's the people of Marsabit, it is the people of Namibia, it's the people of Rwanda, whatever country it is that actually say these things online. You understand? So it begins with that. So to answer your question, I do not think ideally, in introduction, you mentioned my theological background. I come from a school of thought that we're in a fallen world. We're not perfect. So imperfect human beings will always express imperfection in everything they do. So there'll never be an ideal platform that can say this is good and this is what can happen. Because quite frankly, most of us is not very young, quite young, but before all these social media companies, we still had issues, didn't we? Yeah, with other traditional media. So just because they're there doesn't mean that's a problem. So for me, it begins with us. And in this space, I know that's why we have this coalition. Many organizations and entities that really engage now communities on that level in sensitization and engagement. Because if you control the polluter, then the river becomes clean, in a sense. Because Facebook, or Twitter or X right now is just the channel. Okay, it's just a channel. So the pollution is coming from upstream. So we are busy fighting the channel, forgetting that the pollution is right here. So I always have the opinion of addressing the polluters. So back to the question, I don't think good people can elect bad leaders, if you ask me. So it's us, it is we. Social media is a reflection of who we are as a society, good or bad. It's just an unfortunate reality, but that's what I believe. So for me, I address it as it is so that I can have a correct intervention, especially when it comes to peace. Because if you're not realistic in that approach, and have this, I don't want to call it utopian approach, then actually in the real world, when there's theater, the theater of conflict, well, that's where we operate, and we see the convergence of social digital spaces and conflict, then you can never address root causes, because now digital platforms are no longer becoming accelerators to conflict, but to an extent, sometimes we have seen it evolve and morph actually to a root cause in certain conflicts in our country. Yeah.
Thank you. So that was a very thought-provoking beginning to this reflection. And now we'd like to open it to all of you to ask any questions you might have of one or both of our speakers. So I think we have some roving mics that are coming. And I can already see a hand right there. So we can start with Lena, and then we can move on. Yeah, and I've seen Ravi next, and Vijaya. Okay, I'm going to try to keep you in mind.
Thanks so much. I'm Lena from Search for Common Ground. You know, one of the elephants in the room is that this is free, right? And so we get the impression that like it's a gift and we should be happy that we have this social media for free. And I want to just reflect back on this last comment that you made, that like the idea that social media is just a reflection of who we are. It's designed as a product that's bringing profit to the companies. It's designed to maximize engagement. And thus, I disagree that it is just a mirror of who we are. Yes, the people putting out hate speech and misinformation are people and bots and tomorrow, AI, right? But I think there's something that it's important to recognize that this is a product that's being offered to us for free, and what if that changed, right? Would we be as complacent if we had paid for this? Would we be accepting a faulty product in our hands and in our nation that we govern if we paid for it, if it was costing the Kenyan government money to run this? So I think sometimes reframing is also really important. Thanks.
I'm Ravi. I actually worked at Meta for a period of time, and we used to do these research. Sometimes publishers would come to us, politicians would come to us, and they would say, we are producing content we are not proud of because it does better on your algorithm. And so, you know, rather than just being a reflection, that was an indication to me that we were causing them to do something that different than they would already do, right? We're not just reflecting what they want to say, but they are saying things they don't want to say, or because it does better on their algorithm. They're being more divisive. And I don't know for sure if that is happening in Kenya as well, but I've heard that in many places around the world. So I just wanted to introduce that idea that, you know, the platforms are not, you know, people respond to incentives. So if I get more attention for being more divisive, then I'm going to be more divisive. And so I just wanted to sort of dovetail on Lena's point.
My kind of goes well with the previous two comments, which is that at what point do we stop waiting on the goodwill of Meta and TikTok and these other platforms to clean up their pollution? And at what point do we shut down the plant? Or at what point do we put other restrictions on their ability to operate that will force them to actually clean up their act? We don't rely on the goodwill of other companies to clean up their pollution. Why is it different in this space? And this is a frustration that I have with my government in the USA. So I'm not just saying that, I'm not asking that simply for your government, but I'm asking as a member of a government, where do you see your role in asking the polluters to clean up their pollution?
So if it's free, then does that mean it's a reflection? Are there incentives that content producers are responding to, and what might be the role of government? And I'm going to extend it actually to civil society in holding pollutants to account. So shall we start with you, Danvers, and then we'll move?
Okay, so it's good to have this debate and engagement. And so I agree with you on the issue. So I know what you're talking about. So we know, for example, how, so let's get a little bit technical because of what you're referring to. On the personalized feed algorithms they run, okay? So all these tech companies use that, and some of them have extremely powerful algorithms coupled with AI to determine what you see and what you want, and they're very predictive in what, even to your proclivity, what you might have an inclination to, good or bad, okay? I know that. So let's go to the technical side. That is very true. Secondly, we say in tech that if it's free, then you are what? You're the product. So, come on, there ain't nothing free in this world, okay? So if it's free, you're the product. So let's face it here. So, absolutely true. Also, they are purely there to make money. I mean, and that's if I do a business, I'm there to make money. I ain't doing it for charity. It's not about I'm being altruistic. I'm doing there to make money, and I agree with you on that. But here is a reality. and to what you said, especially from an insider perspective, and it's true. And I've seen numerous research. I've seen there's another research that was done still with leaked on Matter. When we so let me put it this way, and to answer both the questions now, what you said connectively. We had a press conference last year, and I was doing the press conference. A number of organizations that come together. Global Leaders was one of them, I think Foxtrot, in trying to see whether Meta, the algorithm, can pick up very offensive or incendiary words or insightful words, especially in our context. They published horrendous things, pushed it on Meta, and Meta's algorithms took them and boosted them, actually. They actually started boosting them. The algorithm just boosted them. Didn't flag them, didn't shut them down, boosted them. Now, we are the premier organization when it comes to peace in the country. We're also running some peace messaging. I think Code Africa is here. We did a lot of work with them within this thing. Now, they would even refuse us to post some of our messages. This is about peace. We are a government entity. They know us. We are officially registered as a government entity, and we are saying, vote peacefully. They wouldn't allow us to post it. Yet the most vile content was being posted. So we had published it. We gave them time to respond. They didn't respond. They said, the same PR they'll give you. So we had a press conference. I reached out to CAK. My good friend, the Director General at that time was Shilopa. I told him, and the director also in charge of this space, we had a discussion with them at that level. Say, listen, this is my issue with Meta. This is what I'm going to say in the press conference. What do you think? They said they work closely with Meta, and let's see whether we can post some of the officers at CAK so that there's a quick pull down. I said, pull down is not the issue, like you said. I don't want to pull down anymore to address if the lady was asked, what is government doing? So I said, I'm going to give them an ultimatum. So I talked to the Director General of CAK because they are the ones now overall in charge, legally speaking, of these entities. As is content, them it's the operations themselves. So in the press conference, I gave Meta 7 days to comply, and this is very important, to their break the glass ceiling measures. Most of you know what that is, the break the glass ceiling measures. If you don't, after the insurrection, okay, should I use the word insurrection? But after being sensitive here, after January 6th, the U.S., so I think I gotta be sensitive here. After January 6th, Meta had put up measures within the algorithm so that if something negative and bad goes viral, they can automatically just pull it down, shut it down, and remove it. So we said to Meta, break the glass ceiling measures you have in the US. For the sake of elections, you need to deploy them and employ them in our country. I think that's fair, right? I think that's a very fair, to us also your question. As a government, from a policy perspective, legal perspective, that's a very fair request. So I gave them 7 days to comply to their own. I talked to a few people behind the scenes, understood what time it will take, the lead times and technology part to deploy it. I said, okay, you know what, give me 7 days to do it. BBC picked up that story, CNN picked up that story, that said the government of Kenya wants to ban Facebook. You remember that story? So I was the one who was being accused of banning Facebook. Oh, geez, I can tell you I did not sleep the whole weekend. Calls came from everywhere, from the US. You know how powerful the lobbies they are. I mean, they lobby Congress, and calls came from the senators to this government. And we were in Nakuru, and the president actually was in Nakuru, and the former president, he starts calling because he gets calls from the US. I mean, Meta is powerful, believe you me. I knew how powerful these people are when we faced them, okay? I mean, extremely powerful. And unfortunately, I'm going to be very frank and honest with you here. recommendations to TikTok, I forgot to say that one of the recommendations is let agencies do their work without political interference. Okay? Let agencies do their work in regulation without what? Political interference. Because I can tell you, our work is not easy because there was a lot of political interference when it came to that space. Because now Meta was put in notice, they're backfooting now. What did they do? Put up their lobbying machine up in K Street. The K Street guys started Capitol Hill and our government and our president. It was that level of intense pressure. I got called. I went to a high-level meeting, security meeting. I told them, listen, I did not, here is my statement. I did not say I'm going to ban Meta. Okay, I just say they need to comply to their own internal mechanisms they do in other countries. That I was being very fair. So the challenge we have to answer that, and back now to circle back, you see, here's the reality. If you look at our issue with Meta that time, in perspective, to be very fair, I'm going to be very fair, and I like being very fair. 98% of content is very good. Okay, as far as the country is concerned, because we do social monitoring, okay? It's just funny stuff, Kenyans, memes here and there, really crazy stuff, funny, just really crazy stuff. You can, if you're really depressed, just go on social media, you will laugh your day out, your depression will go away. That's therapy for you, okay? Let me advise you, if you're feeling bad, just go on social media. There's enough content creators, or one of the recommendations for content creators to be paid well on TikTok, okay? Because they're not really paying out content creators. Anyway, that's another thing. So it's the 2% that is lethal and dangerous and vitriol that we're addressing. So the question is in regulation, do you punish the 98% Nenima by having this draconian regulation, or do you have, what balance do you have so that now you can target the 2% that is very dangerous to society and peace and stability? Okay, so that's from a regulation of where we come from. That's why we can never advocate for banning. And I never said we should ban Facebook. I was just clear that they should comply, or else CAK, we will recommend to CAK as an institution to ban Facebook in our country. Now, lastly, last week, 2 weeks ago, during when we were having our exams, national exams, for those who know very well, the government put restrictions on what? On Telegram, right? And to engage it. And of course, we had serious issues. I had serious issues with that. But at the end of the day, this is my take on it. And as much as these tech companies are there for profit and have algorithm, let's be real, if that algorithm was acting on that TV by itself, it will do absolutely nothing. They're using it because we're human beings and they know our proclivity. They know our inclinations, okay? They know what is good or what we can do or shouldn't do. They know how to activate and turn us. They know our potential. Also, there's a responsibility we have as human beings not to respond to, not to be baited. I call it a bait. It's a bait they use, okay? And we get suckered in very quickly. So to me, there's a balance to it. It's yes, they do that, but also we are not equally very innocent as human beings. We're not apart, we are not above. We weren't just angels out there and Facebook came and made us very bad people. No, there's a component that there is to it. So for us as government is now to find the regulation to protect the 98%, to facilitate, make sure our children are safe, society is peaceful, and then hunt down those 2%. Lastly, but not least, as an organization, we have the legal mandate to prosecute. So right now we have, still answering our question, we have 86 cases in court as we speak of mostly bloggers, because politicians use bloggers as proxies to spread their malintent and so we have 86 cases in court. I mean, our legal process is very lengthy. It's going to take another 3-4 years before those cases are determined. But we are keen also on giving deterrence to those who might think it's a free for all and they can do whatever they want to do. So to answer your question, it's not free per se. You can never do what you want to do because we do monitor. We know there's the few actors, the bad apples. So we've taken a number of them to court, and hopefully there will be deterrence. But is it a solution 100%? I don't think so. For me, it's just to educate the public and make sure it is used for the positive rather than negative?
So we first started on X actually, and Lina, I actually interned at SFCG. Yeah, in DC. So I remember you. I know you don't remember me. We were very many interns. Anyway, so it's good to see you. So what I'm seeing, which is worrying and concerning, because changing perspective and the framing. We've seen now X is charging, and initially we've done so many campaigns, led to almost 131 million impressions on our platform. And it got to a point where, when it happened, where to get verified, you need to pay. We sat down with the team and we were like, we're not going to do it. We're going to stand firm. We're not going to pay for this because it's going against our ethic. And we didn't last long. Especially even during the election, Commissioner, as you're sharing, we couldn't share content. And my work is elections. My work is verifying politicians and sharing the right information and having the reach, which is actually young people, and I couldn't work. So we ended up having to pay for the verification. And it came from my communications officer, Daisy, and she said, Nerima, I need to put up these posts, and it will allow us to do it, have longer videos, have longer content. We are the good people. And it's unfortunate that the bad guys have the best networks. And that's what we're seeing. And even during the election, when especially young women who are being trolled a lot, and Meta had a lot of engagements, I never saw them more engaged than 2022. And they would come to us and tell us, who are the worst bloggers? Who are the toxic ones? We want to keep an eye on them. But they didn't really get rid of them. And what they had was KEWOPA, the Kenya Women Parliamentarian Association. They had a close connection to Meta. So anytime a high-level woman was blocked or her content was blocked, they just called Meta. And Meta would be like, okay, we'll clear it. But I didn't have that access. So till today, there are about 30 young women, their accounts were never reopened. And they're politicians. Her political career died in 2022 because we use these platforms to communicate. That's your new media. That's how you show people how you're campaigning. They are off the grid. So now what we're seeing is it's now blocking out people who don't have money. And it's scary, or people who do not have access. And so when you talk about a population that's majority young and broke and desperate, what does that mean? You can maybe have the numbers, Commissioner. How many bloggers were there in 2022? Thousands.
Thousands, yes, thousands.
Thousands. And this is scary because you're talking about people who have access because a richer person is paying for them to have access to spew toxicity. While they're good people, we're silent, but not intentionally. We're blocked out. And that's the framing that I think we need to start looking at and questioning, because politics is a huge conversation in African countries. They're the ones that also spew a lot of these emotive reactions online more than anything. It's football and politics on our continent. And so when you have political leaders having followers of up to 3 million, and some of them, the people who manage their accounts, you'd be surprised the people who manage their accounts. I get scared. There's one night I was with a student, he's 25, and he's handling an account of a very, very influential high-level figure. And I'm like, if this guy just went to a party and got drunk and was in a bad argument about politics, he could totally post this. And this could lead to utter chaos. But we do not see that. And so for me, I would say it's also the intentionality of our own leadership. And I agree with you, there's a lot of political interference. And we also see political leaders sitting on boards for platforms. So for them, it's the bag. And so we have laws in our constitution that stop them from doing private business, but it's completely ignored. So here we are saying we're going to hold them accountable when we don't hold our own leaders accountable, then it's a free game for all.
So after those answers, does anybody dare to ask more questions? I had Diana. You had your hand up earlier. Do you still have your hand up? Yeah. Okay. So Diana had her hand up, and Said, I saw you as well.
I was wondering about who designs policies that regulate the digital space. I had this debate the other day with another person who told me that there shouldn't be as much participation in the device of digital policies because that's something that is very technical. And I don't necessarily agree, but I know that there's a fine line about how technical these issues are. And I was wondering your thoughts. How can we involve better people in the conversation of how to regulate these platforms and who should be involved and how, basically? Thank you.
I'm Said from University of Hamburg, but originally from Ethiopia. So I do some social NLP research for low resource language for Ethiopian language. Commissioner, you raised a very important concept. Like the content is not the social media platforms. It is us. I have a PhD student who has been doing hate speech analysis for Ethiopian based on Twitter dataset. On May 26 morning, we wake up and we don't have no access to get data from Twitter anymore. So it is our own data, but we have no access anymore. And yeah, you have to pay to get the data. And for us, for like researcher in Ethiopia, paying for this data, it's totally impossible. So this data, it's not for personal. It's actually, we use this data to make Twitter or X better. We have been trying to get access to Meta for several years. We have no access. They just complicate the access process, and we stop. So I want to raise one question that Helena was raised, but I don't know if you answer it. So if we are not getting this data from us, or if the platforms are not obeying the rules and regulations, do we have an option to have our own? What's the challenge? What's our problem? Is that we don't have the manpower? Is that we don't have the infrastructure, like to have our own homegrown platform? Thank you very much.
My name is Karen from Pioneer International University, and I have a question. We talked about us being the product when, for instance, these apps are free, like Meta and TikTok, that is. And I think one of the questions that I had to ask is, we can clearly see that some apps like TikTok have a user interface that is really addictive. Like, it's made to like suck you in it. So I think when you talk about regulations and policies, like, have we really considered like sustainable and like a collective responsibility? Because it's not just about like the citizens at this rate. It's also about the people who are in that space, like the technocrats, the companies itself, yeah? Like, what are some of the sustainable regulations that we are working on concerning that in specific? Because we can be fighting for a lot of things, but it's still like gaining a lot of traction because of the type of tech that is being utilized to suck people in. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for those three questions. So if I could ask both of you, Commissioner and Narima, to answer those questions, and also if you have any closing statements that you want to make them then as well, that would be wonderful.
I'm not sure anybody here, I don't know how many here have read the Data Protection Act that was just recently published and gazetted in our country. How many people have read it? I know probably myself, but how many people have read Data Protection Act here? I would encourage you to read it. It is to me, okay, it's imperfect, of course, but it is one of the most inclusive legal pieces of procedures that are produced in our country, especially when it comes to this space. It was, to an extent, was everybody involved? No. But key players were involved in developing that data protection act and policy. Why I'm saying that is because I want us also not to lose this, what we're doing today, and put it in perspective. And you can be, and that's why you're here. I think that's why you're invited here. We're in the process of amending a number of acts when it comes to the digital space and peace building. As we speak, we just finished reviewing our peace architecture of our country for the next 20 to 50 years, designing it. We had a previous one which had issues. So through UNDP, they financed that whole aspect, and it was very consultative part. And a major component that was digital peace building. Okay, I was participating in that, especially in the digital space, and we came up with very innovative ideas, which you will see. Because for me, working in the real world where there's conflict, and also the tech space, I understand how those two merge and converge. What I don't want us to lose, and I'm seeing the people that you have here, these are experts, these are really people who are experienced in their fields. I want us, if possible, Elena, to, I know UNESCO convenes these, to invite this forum to participate as we review certain pieces of legislation as it comes to digital space. Where we come from, we don't believe we're experts in everything. We don't know it all. So we want to invite you, especially from a technical angle, and those who are more experienced, and not beyond the technical space, even to the academia, and the practitioners, especially those who are in peace building. Because we want to get very innovative, progressive, well thought out, circumspect legislation. Okay? So I don't know how we can glean that from this, but I submit that you can coordinate and help us to do that. So I want to put that also, take that to the next level. Okay, to me, I see an opportunity that we can all of here have a significant input in that space when it comes to legislation. Because we've seen those legislations which have collaborative approach and those which are not, and the outcome is very different. Okay? So we want to do that, have this participation. You guys are the experts. You're the experts in this field, so you know better than we do in certain aspects. On the issue you've raised, my dear brother from Ethiopia, I don't know whether you know for a fact that the first case we enjoined with Meta, actually Facebook specifically, was the issue of, there is a professor in Ethiopia, and it's a true story. This is a court case in our country. That's why I enjoined to it. That really bad stuff was, what's been going on in Ethiopia, the civil war, and really bad stuff was said about this person. I don't want to read it because I have it here. I can't even read it. It's just vile. And there was numerous attempts, requests to Meta to pull down those harmful, and it was so bad. Some of them were calling for him to be killed, which in a few weeks he was killed. He was actually killed. And that specific case, we took it because there was a lot of evidence, a lot of information, a lot of data that we were able to glean forensically and through many other channels to prove that Meta was culpable to an extent and complicit in the death of this professor in Ethiopia. That case is now a high court now, here. We're enjoined in it because we have the same problem in Marsabit, because people will post things, people die, and Meta just almost sits down and cheer while people are massacred. So I know the Ethiopian story very well, because we have studied it and that's what we're using here to fight Meta here. Well, the offices are right here, yeah? And you see, on the flip side, Narima said there are other platforms. I think we have a number of tech companies here involved, and I think we've never come up with, we can come up with homegrown solutions to your answer. Your answer wasn't really hypothetical. What can we create that is so good, and it'll never be perfect, but I think we can create in our local context, whether it's East Africa, whether it's Africa, something more localized. And we do have them, and trust me, we have a list of them. You know a number of them that we have local. Do they have that reach? Are they that influential? No, they're not. So to an extent, I think it's for us to build our own and support our own and promote our own to that level. As you know, for those who are in the tech here, it is very, I work with a lot of startups. You know how capital intensive it is to do these startups. It is expensive. Getting seed investors and angel investors is not the easiest thing, especially if you're a scale up any technology. So that's a challenge we might have in terms of capital. But in Nairobi, there's a hub. We have a hub right here. And some really innovative stuff are coming up there. I've interacted with some of those kids, and it's really cool stuff that is coming up. We just have to, bring the angel investors and put up. Getting venture capital to an extent in that field is dried up because of the current economic crisis. So that will be a challenge. So let me finish with one other question. The question was on user interface. So let me just read my submission, one of my submissions to the parliament on TikTok on the user interface they have. So this is reading exactly what I submitted, okay? TikTok's powerful personalized content feed has refocused attention on the way algorithms can affect our media diets, especially those that deliver more of what you have consumed in the past. Meta-owned platform Facebook has previously been criticized for a similar algorithm, which had peaked in usage in 2016. The major concern here is that young people are nudged towards more content that is similar to or close to what they have consumed in the past, regardless of how they originally came across such content. This is where the danger of sexually explicit content, exposure, grooming, and even radicalization becomes real. TikTok algorithm is not only a danger to TikTok app users, it is already leased to thousands of other applications used commonly, especially by creators, most of whom do not disclose its usage. We're discussing about how addictive it is. So it's something that we know for a fact, and we try to address it. That's why I said we need to have this forum now, together come up with ideas of, because this is open in Parliament right now. So whatever you have, I can literally submit it formally, and it's considered. We have a number of legislations right now that are being amended. Our act is being amended specifically on social media, okay, and the digital platform, because when our act was written, NCSC Act, the digital space wasn't really there, okay. The incitement was in political platforms and in rallies. So politicians would say all kind of manner of nonsense. These days it's 90% online, yeah. So now we are amending our act to encompass and acknowledge that reality. So the question is, I'm inviting you because you're the experts in this space, okay? How we can collaborate, especially comes to the legislation part that is inclusive, it's well thought out, it's progressive, it's not restrictive as such, but we can help one another and advance and protect our society, but more importantly, have a peaceful and cohesive society. In finishing, let me just do my closing comment you said, because you said I did. I'm privileged to be part of this. I was telling her when I was invited, a purpose I had to be here because this is what we do. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, it's beyond algorithms, numbers, interface, programming. All that happens and all that is important. And it is a reality of our world these days. Where we come from, and I come from, is because we're talking about digital peace building, is, as I've stated earlier in the case of Ethiopia, for me, yesterday night, I got a feed, because we monitor social media. I got a feed of what was happening I was telling earlier, what was happening in our northern part of Kenya called West Pokot. There's a conflict that's been raging on between these communities, especially the Pokots and the Turkanas. They're pastoralist communities. The government is doing an operation. There's a military operation right there, intervention going on as we speak right now. There was collateral damage when KDF, for lack of a better word, bombed. There was things like artillery, and kids from one community were caught in the crossfires, and they were killed. There was an uprising. It was really bad. We started seeing the feeds that were coming on, especially coming from Meta. And immediately my reaction, because of the experience, I almost my blood curdled, because I know where this goes. Why? Because I've seen in conflicts in our country, a good example, Marsabit, what precedes bloodshed and fatality is those feeds that we are seeing yesterday. It's that harmful, vitriol, insightful content. I've seen it. And for a fact, the next day, people will die. So we made calls, started having interventions, called political leaders, called security operators. We had high-level engagements, tried to de-escalate the situation. Why I'm saying that is because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, collectively speaking, I believe that for me, where I'm coming from, at the end of the day, my bottom line is very simple. You're talking about the bottom line. My bottom line is very simple. It's about saving lives. For me, it's about a life. That's my premium, okay? So I'm going to give a reality to you. After it's all said and done, after we do our coding, after we do our programming, after we run our servers and check everything, okay? It all boils down to me. My bottom line is saving lives. So how can we now together, collectively, in your expertise, in your fields, collaborate, partner together to bring peace? Because peace is not an abstract thing, Helena, for me. Peace is not abstract for me. When you go to these communities that have raged in conflict for a long time, it is not abstract. It's a reality. It's about these lives being sustained. It's about saving a life, whether it's a woman, a man, young girls, young boys. It's these lives that matter. So I want to invite all of you, as we partner with these, I'm excited and privileged, to always think about that the long term, to be practical, that in whatever you do, no matter how little that you do, you're contributing to saving a life. Never forget that. It's always about saving a life. And before God, that is the most important thing you can do. Thank you so much. It's great and awesome to be part of this.
Thank you. I will also wrap up by saying that peacemakers are going to be extremely busy for the next maybe decade. And I say this because maybe there's existing research someone can share with me, but the research that I have seen from FIDA, they have done a research and it says when the economy is in a downturn and the high cost of living is terrible, cases of gender-based violence increases. My assumption from that is because now everything now happens digitally, mostly starting, then that means online gender-based violence is going to peak. So that means there's going to be a lot of conflict happening because people are just barely making it. And that also means that in our near future, there's just going to be plenty of work to do. So preparation. And I think it's important to have a lot of data toward this work so that we can see how to approach it, because I believe that the human has changed. I don't even understand the 19-year-old. So every year in my office, we hire a 19-year-old because that's the average age of our country, and I need to figure them out if we're going to work with them. And it's also to say that, NCIC, during the elections in 2022, they had an eminent panel. And I'm really grateful that I was appointed to that panel and we were about 15 of us, majority generals, okay? And I can tell you a typical conversation in a day. Oh, you remember in 1976 when this happened, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and they have this whole conversation across this table, and then at the end of it, they're like, Nerima, social media man. What gives? And so I think that there's also a lot of room. I think there's this open space that we see, entities like NCIC exist, and they're really trying to figure things out. They are. And so how can we support in terms of the work that we do, and also encouraging to open up space for civil society or agencies who are within that space to be at these tables? I think we need more of those, because there's also these silos that have been existing, and the tech space has broken those silos open. And finally, I think that the cases in Kenya are so instrumental, because how Meta was escaping was, we don't have an office in Kenya, but there's a business, processing outfit that does that work for us. It's not us. And so for a local court to say, no, you are responsible, you need to be held accountable, is something that in this space we could utilize heavily to hold them responsible and accountable in our own local contexts. I think that will be so important, and this case is the foundation of that. And what Commissioner has just talked about, that's political micro-targeting. So the fact that it does lead to death, one is too many. And so if nothing is done about it fast enough, we're talking about genocide, entire populations. And this is a very scary thought for a continent that celebrates online dictatorship and military rule. We've already seen 5 military coups in a span of 3 years. And people are saying, make noise. And reading the comments, and Kenyans saying, the God, or even Ugandans, the God of this country, visit us here. Okay? Because I would rather have a leader that just takes, power by the bullhorns, rather than this whole democracy thing. Who cares? So we are actually glorifying violence. And so we need to think why, and what has changed in this young person's mind to think that I'm safer here than me, an individual having the right to vote. I rather that's taken away from me and someone else coming into power and getting the job done. I don't have to be involved. So when people are volunteering that power, this is the people that we're talking about channeling their energies online. And I don't think we are recognizing that shift in the mindset. And thank you so much for the opportunity and for engaging with you all.
Commissioner Ndihokubwayo, it's been an absolute pleasure. We started this conference talking about coalitions and collaboration, and you've both finished also talking about the importance of collaboration across all of the different kinds of people that are here, and with your excellent work. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Can we have one final round of applause for both? Thank you so much.